infinite hells across infinite realities, and John Constantine had visited more than his share. But waking up face down in freezing mud while artillery screamed overhead, that was new. The smell hit him first, promethium, cordite, and something that reminded him of that time in Newcastle he'd sworn never to think about again. Then came the sounds, the thunder of distant guns, the screech of something that definitely wasn't human, and close by, someone praying in a language he shouldn't understand but somehow did. "Bloody hell," Constantine muttered, spitting dirt. His hand instinctively went to his coat pocket. Empty. His cigarettes were gone. That alone told him he was well and truly doomed. He pushed himself up from the trench floor, every joint protesting. Above him, the sky was the color of a week-old bruise, streaked with fire and smoke. To his left, a soldier, no, a guardsman, something in his head supplied, was clutching a lasgun with white-knuckled hands, whispering prayers to someone called the Emperor. The man's uniform was caked in mud and gore, his eyes wide with the thousand-yard stare Constantine knew all too well. "Oi, mate," Constantine croaked. "Where the hell are we?" The guardsman's head snapped toward him, expressions cycling through confusion, suspicion, and finally settling on desperate hope. "You're awake. Throne be praised. The Medicae said you wouldn't." He stopped, squinting. "What regiment are you with? That's not standard issue." Constantine looked down at his trademark trench coat, now considerably worse for wear. "Right. Play it cool, Constantine. You've talked your way out of heaven and hell. This is just wherever the heck this is. Special assignment," Constantine said, putting on his best authoritative tone. "Classified. Now, where are we, and what's doing all the screaming?" Before the guardsman could answer, something massive exploded in the distance, close enough to shake the trench walls and rain dirt on their heads. Through the fire and smoke, Constantine saw it, a shape that made his occult-trained senses scream in recognition and horror. Green skin, massive tusks, and that psychic signature, crude, brutal, and so alien it made his teeth ache. "Emperor's mercy," the guardsman whispered. "The greenskins are pushing again." Constantine's eyes narrowed. Greenskins. Orks. Something whispered in the back of his mind, knowledge bleeding through from whatever cosmic cock-up had dumped him here. And that feeling in the air, that pressure behind his eyes. Magic, but wrong. Not the magic he knew. Something vast and churning and hungry. If you're craving more tales from the dark millennium, where even death might be a mercy, do yourself a favor and subscribe, because in the grim darkness of the far future, you'll need every bit of the Emperor's protection you can get. Trust me on that one. "Right then," Constantine said, checking his pockets again and finding nothing useful except a half-melted lighter. "I don't suppose you've got a smoke?" "No, course not." "All right, let's work with what we've got." He looked at the terrified guardsman. "What's your name, soldier?" "Trooper Milas, sir. 217th Cadian." The man's voice shook, but he held his lasgun steady. Professional. Constantine respected that. "Well, Trooper Milas, I've got good news and bad news. Good news. I've dealt with worse than whatever's out there. Bad news. I'm going to need to use some tricks that might make you very uncomfortable. But I promise you'll be alive to report me for it later." Another explosion, closer this time. The trench wall crumbled, and Constantine caught a glimpse of the battlefield beyond. A nightmare of mud, fire, and bodies. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all fighting and dying under that bruised sky, while something vast and malevolent watched from beyond the veil of reality. Constantine felt the warp, That's what they called it here, he somehow knew, pressing against his consciousness like oil on water. It was chaos and madness and power, all mixed together in a cocktail that would drive most men insane just from proximity. Good thing Constantine had never been most men. He'd figure out how he got here later. Right now, survival came first. And if there was one thing John Constantine was good at, it was surviving when he absolutely shouldn't. 3 days later, Constantine found himself in a queue that stretched the length of what the locals called a muster field, which was really just a massive mud pit where the Imperial Guard processed its endless meat grinder of recruits. He'd lifted a uniform off a corpse. Emperor forgive him, but the poor bastard didn't need it anymore, and spent 2 days watching, listening, and learning how this monumentally stupid military machine operated. The Imperium, he'd discovered, ran on 3 things: paperwork, faith, and an admirable dedication to making everything as complicated as possible. Perfect for a con man. "Next," barked a Munitorum clerk, a woman whose augmetic eye whirred as it scanned the data slate before her. Constantine stepped forward, producing a set of documents he'd liberated from a burned-out command tent and carefully modified with ash, blood, and a minor illusion charm. Nothing fancy, just enough to make the faded text look official rather than forged. John Constantine, formerly of the 12th Britannian Psyker Auxiliary, he said smoothly. Transfer papers got burned in the last attack. Regiment's gone. I'm all that's left. The clerk's augmetic eye clicked and focused on the papers, then on his face. Constantine kept his expression neutral, tired, grieving, but professional. He'd played this role before, just in different hells. Psyker Auxiliary? The clerk's human eye narrowed. You don't have a collar. Where's your handler? Dead, along with everyone else. Constantine leaned in slightly, dropping his voice. Look, love, I know how this sounds, but I'm sanctioned, tested, and the Emperor knows you need every warm body you can get. Those greenskins aren't going to shoot themselves. The clerk studied him for a long moment. Constantine could feel her suspicion like a physical weight. Then she sighed, the universal sound of a bureaucrat who couldn't be asked to dig deeper into obvious bullshit when there was a war on. Psyker rating? Theta grade. Constantine lied smoothly, picking a number he'd heard mentioned that sounded appropriately unimpressive. Low enough not to be threatening, high enough to be useful. Specialization. Divination. Bit of warding. Kept the lads from getting their souls eaten mostly. That part was actually true, just with different lads in a different universe. More clicking from the augmetic eye. Your records are conveniently absent from the main database. Fire tends to do that to cogitators, Constantine said. But I've got this. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a tattoo he'd inked onto his arm the previous night, using ash and his own blood. A crude approximation of the Aquila he'd seen everywhere. Beneath it, he'd added symbols that might pass for Imperial Psyker designations if you squinted. They were actually protection sigils from 3 different occult traditions, but close enough. The clerk made a noise that might have been amusement or disgust. Fine. Emperor knows we're desperate enough. She stamped something on a data slate. You're assigned to the 217th Cadian, 3rd Company, 2nd Platoon. Report to Commissar Reval for Psyker Protocol Review. Next. If you're still watching this cosmic farce, go on, subscribe. Ring the bell too. You'll want front row seats for the next apocalypse. Constantine took his newly official transfer orders and walked away before she could change her mind or look too closely at his paperwork. The 217th Cadian. Good. That was Trooper Milas's unit. At least he'd have one friendly face who'd seen him in action, even if that action had mostly consisted of not dying. He found the 217th section of the camp by following the smell of recaf, some horrible synthetic coffee substitute that tasted like engine grease and despair. The guardsmen were a mix of hardened veterans and terrified conscripts, all bearing the same haunted expression Constantine had seen on soldiers throughout history. War never changed, just the scale of the horror. "Constantine," Milas spotted him first, surprise and relief crossing his face. "You made it through processing. I wasn't sure." He lowered his voice. "After what you did in the trench, I thought they might what? Shoot me?" Constantine pulled out the battered lighter he'd kept and flicked it absently, wishing for a cigarette. "Not without paperwork, they won't. Bureaucracy's the same everywhere, mate. You just need to know which forms to forge." A shadow fell across them. Constantine looked up into the face of a man whose entire existence screamed, "Political officer with a hair trigger." Black coat, gold braid, and a bolt pistol that looked well used. The Commissar's peaked cap cast his eyes in shadow, but Constantine could feel the suspicion radiating off him like heat. "So," Commissar Raval said, his voice soft and infinitely more dangerous for it, "you're the new sanctions psyker. How convenient that you arrived just as we lost our last one to a perils incident." Constantine met his gaze without flinching. He'd stared down demons, angels, and the first of the fallen himself. One paranoid military cop wasn't about to make him blink. "Convenient for you, maybe," Constantine said. "I'd rather have stayed with my old regiment. But the Emperor apparently has other plans." Raval's hand rested on his bolt pistol. "Indeed. And should the Emperor's plans deviate from orthodoxy, I will be watching very closely." The Voxcaster in the command bunker had been acting up for 3 days. Standard Imperial Guard equipment, built to last through everything from artillery barrages to acidic alien blood, didn't just malfunction. But Sergeant Keras, the company's Vox operator, had chalked it up to atmospheric interference from the Ork artillery and requisitioned a replacement that wouldn't arrive for another month. Constantine knew better. He'd been drawn to the communications bunker by instinct, that same prickling sensation at the base of his skull that used to warn him about demonic activity back in London. The bunker itself was a reinforced rockcrete cube half buried in mud, crammed with equipment that looked like someone had crossed Victorian radio sets with cathedral organs and then beaten the result with a wrench. "You shouldn't be in here," Keras said, looking up from his station. The sergeant was young for his rank, probably earned it by watching everyone senior to him die. His hands moved across the Vox controls with practiced efficiency. Command frequencies restricted. "Relax, I'm just having a look," Constantine said, moving closer to the main Vox unit. The hairs on his arms were standing up. "How long's it been doing that?" "Doing what?" "That." Constantine pointed at the brass dials, where the needles were oscillating in patterns that definitely weren't random. Not Morse code, not Imperial battle cant. Something else. Something familiar and deeply, deeply wrong. Keras frowned. "It's just static from..." The Voxcaster screeched, a sound like nails on a chalkboard mixed with a dying animal. Both men winced. Then, through the static, a voice emerged. Not speaking Low Gothic, not speaking anything human at all. but Constantine understood it. "The walls grow thin," the voice whispered, layered and distorted like 1,000 throats speaking in unison. "The veil tears. We see you, Warlock. We remember you. Even here." Constantine's blood ran cold. He reached out and switched the vox off, but the voice continued, bleeding through the dead speakers like audio from a frequency that shouldn't exist. "What the hell?" Keras stammered, backing away from his station. "That's not possible. The unit's off." "Yeah, well, possible is having a bad day." Constantine pulled out his lighter and sparked it, holding the flame close to the vox unit. In the flickering light he could see them, symbols forming in the tarnish on the brass, crawling across the metal like living things. Enochian script, summoning circles, things that shouldn't exist in this universe but somehow did. "You cannot hide, John Constantine," the voice continued, almost playful now. "We followed you through the screaming dark, through the spaces between. The warp remembers all debts." "Shut it!" Constantine hissed at the voxcaster. He traced a symbol in the air with his free hand, something quick and dirty from the Key of Solomon. Nothing happened. Wrong universe, wrong rules. Bollocks. Keras was hyperventilating now, clutching his laser gun like it might help against whatever this was. That's impossible. Voxcasters they can't. "Listen to me very carefully," Constantine said, keeping his voice calm despite the ice in his veins. "You're going to report this as standard equipment failure, atmospheric interference, solar radiation, whatever technical bollocks will keep people from asking questions. Because if you report what's actually happening, the Commissar will execute us both for heresy." Keras finished, catching on quickly. "Smart lad." The voice from the voxcaster laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tell them, little soldier. Tell them the Warlock speaks with demons. Tell them he knows the words that open doors. Tell them." Constantine grabbed a maintenance tool from the wall and smashed it into the voxcaster's main cogitator unit. Sparks flew. The voice cut off mid-sentence, leaving only blessed silence and the smell of burning electronics. "Oops," Constantine said flatly. "Equipment failure." Keras stared at the smoking wreckage, then at Constantine, then back at the wreckage. "That's a court-martial offense. Destroying Imperial equipment during wartime. So's letting demons use your communications grid as a telephone." Constantine dropped the tool and moved to the door, listening for approaching footsteps. Clear for now. "Look, I know this is above your pay grade. Hell, it's above mine. But something's using the Vox network, and it's not Orks. They're not subtle enough for this." "Then what?" "Something that came through the warp. Something that knows me." Constantine's mind was racing. Back home he had protections, wards, a whole network of occult defenses. Here, he had nothing but his wits and whatever magic still worked in this nightmare universe. And if it's in the communications equipment, it can listen to everything. Every order, every position, The emergency vox across the room crackled to life. Then the backup unit. Then the handheld units charging on the wall. All of them speaking in that same layered, impossible voice. "Run, little warlock. Run, run, run. But there is nowhere the warp does not touch. Nowhere we cannot reach. And the gods here, oh, the gods here are so much hungrier than the ones you knew." Constantine grabbed Keras by the shoulder. "New plan. We're going to the Commissar, and we're going to tell him we have a demon problem, and then you're going to pray that he shoots the demon before he shoots us." Commissar Rival listened to Constantine's explanation with the expression of a man deciding which heresy to execute first. They stood in the command bunker with Lieutenant Vaughan, the platoon's commanding officer, while Keras nervously clutched his laser gun and tried to become invisible. "So," Rival said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you're telling me that a demon knows your name, specifically, and followed you here from where exactly?" Constantine lit a cigarette he'd finally managed to trade for. Cost him a week's rations and a promise to read a guardsman's fortune. Worth it. Different universe, technically. Long story. Involves a botched banishing ritual, a collapsing reality, and probably some chaos god thinking it'd be funny to drop me in your laps. And I should believe this because I know what's happening to your Vox network, and you don't. Constantine took a drag, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. "I've been dealing with demonic possession since before you were born, Commissar. This is textbook. Something's using your communications equipment as an anchor point, and it's only going to get worse." Lieutenant Vaughan, a grizzled veteran with a bionic arm, spoke up. "We've had 3 other Vox casters malfunction this week. Different bunkers, different operators. All reported hearing voices before the equipment failed. All of them heard the same thing?" Constantine asked. "No, each one heard something different." Vaughan pulled out a data slate. Private Gent heard his dead mother calling him home. Corporal Sasha heard what she described as the enemy's battle plans, but wrong somehow. And Trooper Yaren heard. He paused, uncomfortable. Singing. He said it was beautiful. We found him trying to claw his way through the bunker wall toward the sound. Bollocks. Constantine's cigarette burned forgotten between his fingers. That was worse than he thought. Not one demon using the Vox network. Multiple entities, each one targeting specific individuals, learning their weaknesses. That's not random possession, that's coordinated, intelligent. Something's testing your defenses, finding weak spots, and this demon knows you how. Rival's hand never left his bolt pistol. "Back home, I've got a reputation. You live long enough dealing with demons. You make enemies. Lots of them." Constantine met the Commissar's gaze. "But here's the thing. What you call demons, I call Tuesday. Where I'm from, they follow rules. Specific rules. Summoning circles, true names, binding contracts. You can trick them if you're clever and suicidal enough. And in the warp?" Vaughan asked. "Different rules. Bigger bastards. But the principle's the same." Constantine tapped ash onto the floor, ignoring Rival's disapproving glare. "Something out there recognized me when I arrived. Probably got a whiff of my psychic signature and thought, oh lovely, fresh meat that already knows the game. But here's what it doesn't know. I'm not playing by its rules anymore." A Vox unit in the corner suddenly crackled. All 4 men tensed. "But you are, Warlock," the voice purred through the speakers. "You're playing exactly as we knew you would. Coming to the Commissar, claiming expertise, worming your way into their trust. It's what you do, isn't it? Constantine the trickster, Constantine the survivor, Constantine who lets everyone else die." Rival's bolt pistol was out and aimed at Constantine's head in a heartbeat. "Explain. Now. It's trying to turn you against me," Constantine said calmly, not taking his eyes off the Vox unit. "Classic demon play. Make the humans distrust each other. Isolate the target. then move in when everyone's paranoid and fractured. I've seen it 100 times. Newcastle, the voice whispered. Tell them about Newcastle, John. Tell them about the little girl you sacrificed to save your own skin. Tell them about Astra. Tell them how many souls you've traded for your miserable life. Constantine's jaw tightened. Shut your festering mouth. The truth burns, doesn't it? Even here, across realities, your sins follow. The warp remembers everything, every betrayal, every death you caused, every... Constantine strode forward and drove his lit cigarette into the Vox unit's speaker grill. There was a shriek like metal tearing, and then silence. He turned back to find 3 weapons pointed at him. "All right," he said, raising his hand slowly. "I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I've done terrible things. Yes, people have died because of my choices. That's what happens when you fight demons. Sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, and sometimes winning costs more than losing would have. But right now, in this trench, on this emperor-forsaken planet, I'm the only one who knows what's happening and how to stop it." "Or you're the source," Raval countered. "The infection, the demon using you as a conduit. If I were possessed, Commissar, you'd already be dead. Possession is loud, obvious. This," Constantine gestured at the smoking Vox unit, "this is reconnaissance, the daemons testing responses, gathering information, learning how your people think. It's smart, patient, and it's not in me, it's in the warp itself, using your equipment as windows to peek through." Vorn lowered his weapon slightly. "Assuming we believe you, and that's a very large assumption, what do we do?" Constantine pulled out another cigarette, lit it off the burning Vox unit, and smiled grimly. "We do what I always do when demons come knocking. We cheat, we lie, and we make sure the bastard regrets ever learning my name." Commissar Raval didn't shoot Constantine. Not immediately, anyway. Instead, he assigned 2 guards to watch him at all times, confiscated his lighter, which Constantine promptly stole back, and made it abundantly clear that one whiff of actual corruption would result in summary execution. "I've dealt with rogue psychers before," Raval said, standing too close to Constantine in what was clearly an intimidation tactic. It might have worked if Constantine hadn't spent decades dealing with actual demons. They always think they're special, smarter than the rules, stronger than the corruption. They all die the same way, screaming and begging as the warp takes them. "Comforting," Constantine said around his cigarette. "You practice that speech in the mirror." Raval's eye twitched. "Mock me again and I'll..." "Shoot me. Yeah, I got that part." Constantine blew smoke deliberately away from the Commissar's face. No point being rude about it. "Look, mate, I understand your position. You've got a political job in a military machine, which means you're basically paid to be paranoid. But paranoia doesn't stop demons. Action does. So either let me work or shoot me and hope the next psyker you get is half as good at not getting everyone killed." For a moment, Constantine thought Raval might actually pull the trigger. The Commissar's hand moved to his bolt pistol, fingers twitching. Then Lieutenant Vorn's voice crackled over the Vox. "Sir, we have another incident. 3rd bunker, eastern perimeter. You need to see this." The eastern bunker was chaos when they arrived. 2 guards lay unconscious outside, bleeding from their ears. Inside, Sergeant Karras was restraining a young Vox operator, couldn't have been more than 19, who was laughing and crying simultaneously while clawing at his own face. "The voices," the boy, Private Denton, according to his uniform, sobbed between fits of laughter. "They're singing. Can't you hear them singing? They know the words. They know all the words. Every prayer we've ever said, they're singing it back wrong." Constantine pushed past Raval and grabbed Denton's face, forcing the boy to look at him. "Oi, look at me. Not at whatever's whispering in your skull. Me, right here." Denton's eyes focused briefly, pupils blown wide. You're the one they want, the warlock. They say you taste like home." "Yeah, well, home's a shithole anyway." Constantine released him and turned to Keras. "How long's he been like this?" "Started 10 minutes ago. He was running diagnostics on the main Vox array when he just stopped, stood there for maybe 30 seconds, then started screaming." Constantine moved to the Vox equipment. It was newer than the one he'd destroyed, more sophisticated, and covered in the same creeping symbols he'd seen before. But these were deeper, etched into the metal like they'd been burned there. He recognized some of them, summoning glyphs from half a dozen occult traditions, all twisted together with something else. Something that made his head hurt to look at directly. "This isn't random corruption," he muttered, tracing one symbol without touching it. "Someone's doing this deliberately, building a ritual circle out of your entire communications network." "Impossible," Raval said. "No one has access to all the Vox equipment. We're spread across 50 kilometers of front line. Doesn't need physical access if it's in the warp." Constantine straightened, his mind racing. "Think about it. Every Vox transmission passes through the same medium, yeah? Radio waves, electromagnetic spectrum, whatever you want to call it. But it's also touching the warp. Everything does here. That's the problem with this universe. The barrier's so thin you can practically see through it. Speak plainly, Warlock. Something's using your Vox network as a giant ritual circle. Every transmission, every signal, every time someone keys their Vox and says a prayer to your Emperor, it's all feeding power into whatever's on the other side. And when the circle's complete..." Constantine didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Vorn swore quietly. "How long? Depends on usage. But if I had to guess, 3 days, maybe 4. Constantine pulled out his cigarette case, down to his last 3, and lit one to think. "We need to shut down the entire Vox network." "That's suicide," Raval snapped. "Without communications, we can't coordinate artillery support, can't call for reinforcements, can't warn other units about enemy movements. The Orks would cut through us like..." "And with communications, you're completing a ritual that's going to make Ork invasions look like a pleasant afternoon," Constantine shot back. "Look, I get it. Military needs its comms. But right now, every time you use that equipment, you're ringing a dinner bell for something that makes your worst nightmares look tame." Behind them, Denton started laughing again, that horrible mix of hysteria and genuine amusement. Too late, too late. The circle's nearly closed. They're coming through. They're bringing friends. So many friends. Constantine grabbed him by the collar. Who's coming through?" Denton's eyes rolled back, showing only whites. When he spoke again, it was with that layered, impossible voice from the Voxcasters. "Old friends, John Constantine. The ones you left behind. The ones you betrayed. The ones who died screaming your name. The warp offered them new flesh, new purpose. They accepted. And now they're coming home." "Bloody hell," Constantine breathed. Rival's bolt pistol was out again. What does it mean? Constantine released Denton, who slumped against Keras, still giggling quietly. It means I'm not just dealing with random demons. Something's organized this. Something that knows me well enough to orchestrate this whole bloody mess. He took a long drag on his cigarette. And I've got a nasty suspicion I know exactly who. Who? Vorn demanded. Constantine smiled, but there was no humor in it. Someone I killed. Several someones, actually. Turns out death's not much of a deterrent when you've got chaos gods willing to give you a second chance at revenge. The Ork attack came at dawn, which Constantine would have appreciated as good dramatic timing if he weren't currently crouched in a trench filled with panicking guardsmen. The greenskins hit the eastern perimeter with their usual tactical sophistication, which is to say, they pointed at the humans and charged while screaming, "Wah!" The sound rolled across the battlefield like thunder made of violence and enthusiasm. Constantine peeked over the trench lip and immediately regretted it. Hundreds of orcs, each one built like a brick shithouse crossed with a fungal infection, sprinting toward their position with an assortment of weapons that looked like they'd been assembled by an enthusiastic child with a welding torch and no adult supervision. "Fire!" Lieutenant Vorn bellowed, and the trench erupted in La's fire. Beams of concentrated light punched through orc flesh, dropping the front runners. The ones behind trampled their fallen mates without breaking stride. "This is insane," Constantine muttered, watching an orc take 3 Laz rounds to the chest and keep coming. "They're not even wearing proper armor." "Don't need it," Trooper Milas said from beside him, firing in controlled bursts. "They're too stupid to know when they should die." Constantine was about to respond when something in the back of his skull screamed a warning. He grabbed Milas and yanked him down just as a crude rocket, more rust than metal, screamed overhead and exploded 50 meters behind them. "Bloody hell!" Milas gasped. "How did you—" "Years of not dying," Constantine said. Then he heard it. Under the sounds of battle, under the screaming and the las fire and the orc war cries, there was something else. A rhythm, a cadence. The orcs weren't just charging randomly. They were moving to a beat that Constantine's occult-trained senses recognized immediately. "Oh, you clever bastards," he breathed. "What?" Milas demanded, firing another burst. Constantine's eyes tracked the orc advance. They looked random, chaotic, but there was pattern in the chaos. The way certain orcs moved, the spacing between groups, even the trajectory of their thrown weapons. It all formed shapes, geometric patterns, ritual geometry. "They're not just attacking," Constantine said. "They're being herded. Someone's using them to complete the ritual." Commissar Rival appeared, bolt pistol in one hand, chainsword in the other. Both weapons were already stained with orc blood. "Explain while we're not being overrun, Warlock. The orcs think they're in control, but they're being manipulated. Look at their movement patterns." Constantine traced invisible lines in the air. 3 major push points, all equally spaced, secondary groups filling in the gaps. And those big ones, the bosses, they're marking cardinal points. Vorn stared at the battlefield, then at Constantine. "You're saying something is controlling the orcs, nudging them, using their natural aggression as cover." Constantine pulled out his last cigarette, decided he needed it more than his future self, and lit it. "Orcs are psychic, yeah? Their whole reality-warping belief thing. That's warp energy, raw and undirected. Perfect fuel for a ritual if you can channel it. An orc burst over the trench lip, roaring and swinging a massive cleaver. Revel's bolt pistol took off the top of its head before Constantine could even flinch. The Commissar didn't even look away from Constantine. Can you stop it? Maybe, probably. Might explode horribly. Constantine took a drag. But I'd need to get close to their boss. The biggest one. Whatever's manipulating them will be using him as the primary anchor. That's suicide, Milas said. Story of my life, mate. Constantine stood, brushing mud off his coat. Right then. I'm going to need some volunteers who are either very brave or very stupid. I'll go, Milas said immediately. No, you won't, Vaughn countered. You're too valuable as a Vox operator once we fix this mess. I'll accompany him, Rival said, his tone making it clear this wasn't voluntary. Someone needs to ensure the warlock doesn't defect to the enemy. Constantine laughed. Defect to the Orks? Mate, I've seen the inside of heaven and hell. I'm not signing up with the Mushroom Brigade. Then you'll have no objection to my supervision. Oh, I've got dozens of objections. But we're short on time, so let's save the personality clash for after we don't die horribly. Constantine vaulted over the trench wall, immediately drawing Orc attention. Las fire from the trenches provided cover as he ran, weaving between shell craters and corpses. Rival kept pace beside him, chainsword revving. You have a plan. Vague outline at best, Constantine shouted over the noise. I'm going to try talking to them. Talking? Yeah. Orcs respect two things, violence and audacity. And I'm fresh out of violence. Constantine slid behind the wreckage of a burned-out Chimera transport. 3 Orcs were closing in from the left, although I might have some audacity left. He stood up, faced the Orcs, and bellowed in a voice that surprised even himself. Oi, you gits, I want to talk to your boss. The Orc stopped, confused. One of them scratched its head with a hand that had a rusty knife welded to it. You speak in Orc? It said, sounding genuinely puzzled. Yeah, learned it from a very angry demon who used to be an Orc war boss. Constantine had no idea if that was true, but it sounded plausible. Now take me to your biggest git before I crump ya. The Orcs looked at each other. Then, in a display of logic that only made sense to greenskin sensibilities, they lowered their weapons and gestured for Constantine to follow. You cannot be serious, Rival hissed. As a heretic at an Inquisition trial, Constantine said, starting to walk. Come on, Commissar. Let's go have a chat with the fungus. Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale of madness and mushrooms chills your soul, because it's about to get much stranger. The Orc warboss was everything Constantine expected and worse. 3 meters of muscle, scars, and poorly maintained cybernetics, sitting on a throne made from what appeared to be a tank, several skulls, and someone's prized collection of medals. The boss, who introduced himself by roaring, "His boss Graka, and you's dead soon," was surrounded by his biggest boys, all eyeing Constantine like he was dinner. Boss Graka, Constantine shouted, because apparently everything was shouting with Orcs. I got a proposition for you. Graka leaned forward, his one remaining organic eye narrowing. The other was a crude mechanical replacement that clicked and whirred as it focused. You's not dead yet. That's funny. Maybe I let you talk for I crump ya. Behind Constantine, Rival's hand was on his bolt pistol. Constantine could practically feel the Commissar calculating the odds of shooting their way out. Spoiler, they were terrible odds. Right then, Constantine said, switching to something approximating normal speech but keeping it loud. Here's the thing, boss. You think you're attacking this position because it's a good scrap, yeah? Yeah, Humie's good for fighting. Not good at it, but lots of them. Exactly. Lots of targets, lots of fighting. Very entertaining. Constantine pulled out his last cigarette, then remembered he'd smoked it. Bollocks. But what if I told you someone's making you dance like a puppet? Using your Wa energy to power up some ritual magic. The orcs around them started muttering. Graka's mechanical eye clicked rapidly. What you sayin'? I'm saying you're being played, boss. Someone's using your natural psychic field, your Wa, to complete a summoning ritual. You're not fighting for fun. You're fighting because something's herding you like grots. Graka stood up, and Constantine was reminded just how terrifying orcs were up close. The war boss's shadow fell across him like a threat made manifest. No one herds Graka, the boss growled, his voice dropping to something almost human in its fury. I fight who I want. I crump who I want. I's the boss. Are you, though? Constantine pressed, because apparently survival instinct was having a day off. Because from where I'm standing, you're moving in perfect geometric patterns. Your boys are hitting specific locations at specific times. That's not random orc aggression, that's choreography. One of Graka's advisors, a particularly scarred orc with more metal than flesh, leaned in and whispered something in guttural orcish. Graka's expression shifted from fury to something that might have been thought if it weren't so ugly. You sayin' some fun using Dawa, stealing our fighting energy. Exactly. And when the ritual completes, whatever comes through is going to be a lot harder to fight than us soft humies. Constantine could see the orc's limited but functional tactical mind working. Think about it. Big demon shows up, starts bossing everyone around, claims all the good fights for itself. Where's the fun in that? Revel leaned close and whispered, What in the Emperor's name are you doing? Diplomacy. Constantine whispered back, Shut up and let me work. Graka sat back down heavily, his throne groaning under the weight. So what you want, Humie? I want to break the ritual, stop whatever's coming through. And to do that, I need to disrupt the pattern. Constantine gestured at the battlefield. Your boys are forming the shape of a summoning circle, yeah? Well, summoning circles need to be perfect. One break in the pattern, and the whole thing collapses. And then what? And then you get to fight whatever was trying to use you. Imagine it. Proper grudge match. You versus something that thought it could control Graka. Constantine was playing to the orc's ego now, and he could see it working. That'd be a story worth telling, innit? The orcs around them started getting excited. Constantine could feel the psychic energy shifting, their collective belief beginning to focus on the idea of a good fight with something that had insulted them. All right, Graka said finally. We help, but when it's done, we still fight you humies properly. Wouldn't have it any other way, Constantine said. Revel grabbed his arm as they turned to leave. You just allied with Xenos. That's heresy. I should execute you right now. Temporarily allied, Constantine corrected. And I just saved your entire regiment from whatever horror was about to crawl out of the warp. So maybe file the execution paperwork for after we're not all about to die. They made it back to Imperial lines under a bizarre ceasefire. Constantine could see the confusion on the guardsmen's faces as orcs and humans stopped shooting at each other. Vorn met them at the trench, his expression caught between relief and absolute horror. "Sir," he said to Rival, "please tell me that wasn't what it looked like." The warlock negotiated a temporary truce with the Orks, Rival said flatly. "What? To prevent a greater threat," Constantine added quickly. "Look, I know it's unorthodox." "Unorthodox? It's heresy." "Yeah, probably. Add it to the list." Constantine looked at the sky, where storm clouds were gathering despite the weather having been clear moments ago. "But right now we've got bigger problems. Whatever's coming through, it's not happy that I just broke its carefully arranged summoning circle. And when demons aren't happy, they tend to get creative about revenge." As if on cue, every voxcaster in the trenches started screaming simultaneously. Not words, not the layered demon voice, just raw, furious sound that felt like nails being driven into Constantine's skull. "Right," he said, lighting a cigarette he'd somehow pickpocketed from one of the Orks during negotiations. Phase 2. This is where things get properly dangerous. Milas, standing nearby, looked at him incredulously. "This wasn't the dangerous part." Constantine grinned humorlessly. "Mate, that was the warm-up. Now we get to the bit where I either save everyone or condemn them all to something worse than death. 50-50 odds at best." The command bunker had become Constantine's workshop, much to everyone's discomfort. He'd requisitioned chalk, blood, his own mostly, 3 mirrors, a dozen candles, and a very confused tech priest's collection of sacred oils. The tech priest had objected until Constantine pointed out that machine spirits and demons operated on similar principles. Both responded to ritual and symbolism. "This is madness," the tech priest, Magos Brennus, said, his mechadendrites twitching nervously. "You defile sacred unguents with your witchcraft." "It's not witchcraft, it's applied metaphysics." Constantine was drawing symbols on the floor, a mix of protective wards he knew from home and improvised versions of the Imperial Aquila. "And unless you've got a better way to stop a demonic incursion, I suggest you let me work." Rival stood in the corner, bolt pistol held loosely but ready. He'd been watching Constantine for 3 hours now, looking for any sign of corruption. Constantine was fairly sure he'd find plenty, just not the kind the Commissar was looking for. "Explain what you're doing," Rival demanded, "in terms that don't sound like heresy." Constantine sat back on his heels, wiping bloody chalk from his hands. "All right. Simple version. The demon tried to use your Vox network as a summoning circle. I broke the circle by convincing the Orks to stop being predictable. But that just pissed it off. It's still trying to force its way through, just without the proper anchoring ritual. And that's worse, much worse. With a proper ritual, demons come through at specific points, under specific conditions. You can predict them, fight them. Without a ritual, they can tear through anywhere the warp is thin enough, which in this universe seems to be basically everywhere. Vaughn entered carrying a data slate. "We've got reports coming in from across the sector. Other regiments are experiencing similar Vox corruption. Whatever's happening, it's not limited to our position." "Fantastic," Constantine muttered. "It's going for a multi-point manifestation. Spread the defense thin, punch through where we're weakest." He stood, surveying his work. The floor was covered in symbols that would make any inquisitor reach for a flamer. "Right. New plan. We can't stop it from coming through." "What?" Rival's pistol came up. "But we can control where. Give it one really tempting target, instead of a dozen weak spots." Constantine pointed at his circle. This is a trap, a summoning circle in reverse. Instead of pulling something through, it's designed to catch something trying to force its way in. And if it doesn't work, then I've just painted a target on all our backs, and we should probably start praying to your emperor, or anyone else who's listening, frankly. I'm not picky. Magos Brennus leaned closer to the circle, his optical implants clicking as they focused. These patterns, they're mathematically sound, crude but functional. How did you learn to calculate warp space geometries without proper training? Lot of trial and error, emphasis on the error. Constantine pulled out his stolen cigarette. The Ork one tasted like burning hair and engine oil, but beggars couldn't be choosers. Now comes the fun part. I need to bait the trap. With what? Vorn asked. Constantine grinned. With me. The demon wants John Constantine. Well, it's going to get him, just not the way it expects. He stepped into the center of the circle and closed his eyes, reaching out with senses he'd spent decades honing. The warp here was different from the magic he knew. More violent, more chaotic, like trying to swim in a river made of broken glass and screaming. But the principle was the same. Energy was energy. Will was will. "Oi!" he shouted into the void. "You wanted to talk? Let's have a proper conversation. Come on then, you cowardly bastard. Show yourself." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature in the bunker dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost crept across the walls. The candles guttered and went out, but the symbols Constantine had drawn began to glow with their own sickly light. "Constantine," Revel warned, his voice tight. "It's working," Constantine said through gritted teeth. The pressure in his skull was building, like someone was trying to crack his head open from the inside. Come on. Take the bait, you predictable piece of reality tore. There was no other way to describe it. The air itself ripped open like fabric, revealing something beyond that made Constantine's eyes water and his nose bleed. Shapes that weren't shapes. Colors that didn't exist. And emerging from the wound in space, something that wore the face of someone Constantine had hoped never to see again. "Hello, John," said Gary Lester. Except it wasn't Gary. Gary was dead, had been dead for years, died screaming in Newcastle because Constantine had used him as bait. But this thing wore Gary's face like a badly fitting mask, its eyes wrong, its smile too wide. "Bollocks," Constantine whispered. The not Gary stepped through into reality, and the circle Constantine had drawn flared bright. Chains of light erupted from the symbols, wrapping around the demon's form. It screamed, not with Gary's voice, but with something vast and terrible and furious. "You think your primitive wards can hold me?" It snarled, Gary's face twisting into something inhuman. "I've learned so much since you left me to die, John. The warp is generous to those who serve. It gives us new flesh, new purpose, new ways to make traitors pay." "Yeah, about that," Constantine said, his hands moving in precise patterns, feeding more power into the binding circle. "I'm really sorry about Gary. Genuinely. He deserved better. But you're not Gary. You're just wearing his face. And that pisses me off." The demon laughed, and frost spread further across the walls. "Oh, I'm Gary enough. I remember every moment, every betrayal, every lie you told. And I'm not alone, John. So many of your failures are here in the warp, waiting. Astra, Emma, your father, all of us, waiting for our chance at revenge." Constantine's hands were shaking, but he kept the ritual steady. "Rival. When I give the word, I need you to shoot the Voxcaster, the main one, against the wall. What? Why? Because this isn't just a demon, it's a signal, a beacon. And if we don't cut its connection to the warp right bloody now, its friends are going to start showing up. And trust me, we don't want that. The demon strained against its bonds, Gary's face contorting. Too late, Constantine, too late. We're already here, in the walls, in the wire, in every machine that touches the warp. You can't kill us all. No, Constantine agreed, but I can kill you. Again, sorry, Gary, if any part of you is still in there. He slammed his hand down on the circle's activation sigil. Now, Rival, shoot it now. The bolt pistol's roar was deafening in the enclosed space. The round punched through the Voxcaster in a spray of sparks and twisted metal, and for one heartbeat, everything froze. The demon wearing Gary's face opened its mouth to scream, and the circle ignited. Constantine had drawn it in blood and chalk, but what burned through it now was pure warp energy, redirected and weaponized. The chains of light became chains of fire, white-hot and hungry. The knot Gary thrashed, its borrowed flesh beginning to peel away like wet paper. "You can't!" it shrieked, its voice deteriorating into something that hurt to hear. "We're already through. In the equipment, in the walls, in the minds of your soldiers. You've already lost, Constantine." "Yeah, probably," Constantine grunted, pouring more will into the binding. His nose was bleeding freely now, his vision blurring at the edges. This kind of magic shouldn't work here, not properly. But he'd always been good at improvising. "But you made one mistake, mate." "What mistake?" The demon's form was collapsing, reality reasserting itself against the intrusion. "You used a face I actually cared about." Constantine's voice was cold. "I've got a lot of guilt about Gary Lester. Mountains of it. So much that I almost let you keep using him. Almost." His hands moved in a final gesture, and the circle contracted like a fist. "But Gary wouldn't want this. He'd want me to end it. So this is for him, not you." The demon screamed one last time, a sound of pure rage and frustration, and then it was gone, collapsing into nothing like a puppet with cut strings. The temperature in the bunker returned to normal. The frost evaporated. Constantine's circle stopped glowing and became just chalk and blood on rockcrete again. Constantine stumbled, caught himself on a table. Every part of him hurt. Using magic in this universe was like trying to swim upstream in acid. It worked, but at a cost. "Is it over?" Vaughn asked quietly. "The demon? Yeah. The problem?" Constantine pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands. "Not even close. It told the truth about one thing. They're already in the system. Every Voxcaster that's being corrupted, every piece of equipment that's been touched. The demon was just the advanced scout. Magos Brennus was already at the destroyed Voxcaster, his mechadendrites probing the wreckage. Impossible. The machine spirits are pure. They cannot be corrupted. Tell that to the demon that was literally broadcasting through them." Constantine finally got his cigarette lit. "Look, I don't know how it works with your machine spirits or whatever, but where I'm from, anything connected can be infected, and your entire military runs on connected equipment." Rival holstered his bolt pistol, which Constantine took as a minor vote of confidence. "So what do you suggest?" "Complete communications blackout. Every Voxcaster, every data slate, every piece of equipment that uses warp-touched energy. Offline, now. Isolate each unit. Check them manually. purge anything corrupted. That will take weeks, Vorn protested. We don't have weeks. The Orks are currently sitting around confused because I broke their ritual pattern, Constantine interrupted. Boss Graka's probably having a lovely time trying to figure out who to fight now. But that won't last forever. So we use the time we've got. And what will you be doing during this communications blackout? Rival's tone made it clear this was a test. Constantine grinned tiredly. Something incredibly stupid that will probably get me killed. Again. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Trooper Milas stood there, wild-eyed and gasping. "Sir, the eastern perimeter, something's happening to the guards." They ran. The eastern perimeter was chaos. 5 guardsmen were standing perfectly still in the trench, their eyes rolled back in their heads, mouths moving in perfect synchronization. They were speaking in that layered demon voice Constantine had heard from the Voxcasters. "One anchor falls," they chanted in unison, "but the foundation remains. The circle is not broken, only changed. You delayed us, Warlock. You did not stop us." Constantine swore creatively. "It's using the soldiers as backup anchors. When I destroyed the Vox network connection, it just adapted." "Can you break this connection too?" Rival demanded. "Not without killing them. The demons too deeply integrated into their minds." Constantine studied the possessed guardsman, his occult senses screaming warnings. "This is different from the Voxcasters. This is personal, intimate. It's been inside their heads, learning them, becoming them." One of the possessed guardsmen, Constantine recognized him as Private Ghent, the one who'd heard his dead mother, turned his head at an unnatural angle to look directly at Constantine. "You should have stayed in your own universe, John Constantine," he said with a dozen voices. "The warp here doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. It consumes. And you're such a delicious morsel. All that guilt, all that self-loathing, all those deaths weighing on your soul. The Chaos Gods are very interested in you." "Fantastic," Constantine muttered. "Just what I needed. Cosmic attention." The possessed guardsmen began to move as one, stepping out of the trench in perfect lockstep. Their hands rose, and Constantine felt power building. Real power, the kind that bent reality and broke minds. "Everyone back!" he shouted. "Now!" The guardsmen's mouths opened impossibly wide, and they screamed, not with sound, with force. The psychic blast hit like a physical wall, throwing everyone backward. Constantine felt it tear at his mind, trying to find purchase, looking for weaknesses. And it found them. It always did. Images flashed through his head. Newcastle, Astra. Every failure, every betrayal, every person who died because Constantine had been too clever, too desperate, too willing to sacrifice others for the greater good. The demon was using his own guilt as a weapon, and it was brutally effective. Constantine fell to his knees, blood streaming from his nose and ears. Through the pain, he heard Rival shouting orders, heard Lasfire, heard screaming. But it all seemed very far away. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Milas, his face pale but determined. "Sir, Constantine, fight it." "Can't," Constantine gasped. "Too strong. It knows me too well." "Then don't fight it alone," Milas shouted. "You've got a whole bloody regiment here. Use us." Constantine looked up at the young guardsman, at the determination in his eyes, at the faith that Constantine absolutely didn't deserve. And he had an idea, a terrible, dangerous, probably heretical idea. "Milas," he said, grabbing the trooper's arm, "do you trust me?" "Absolutely not, sir." "Good man. Smart." Constantine pulled himself up, using Milas for support. "But I need you to pretend you do, just for the next few minutes. Can you do that?" Milas swallowed hard, then nodded. Constantine turned to face the possessed guardsman, who was still advancing, still building power for another psychic assault. And he started to laugh. Not a desperate laugh, not a scared laugh, but the laugh of a man who just realized he was playing a game he actually knew how to win. "All right then," he said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "You want John Constantine. You want the guilt, the fear, the self-loathing. Come and get it. All of it. Every last drop." He opened his mind wide, dropped every defense, and let the demon in. Letting a demon into your mind was like inviting a hurricane into a house of cards. Constantine felt it rush in, eager and hungry, tearing through his memories with gleeful malice. Every regret, every failure, every nightmare. The demon consumed them all, growing stronger with each moment of pain it inflicted. But Constantine had done this before. The trick wasn't to keep the demon out. The trick was to give it exactly what it wanted, and then spring the trap. His mind was a labyrinth by design, built over decades of dealing with creatures that fed on thoughts and emotions. And while the demon gorged itself on his guilt, Constantine quietly, carefully, started building walls behind it, sealing it in, cutting off its escape routes. "You're mine now, Constantine," the demon hissed through the mouths of the 5 possessed guardsmen. "Your soul will feed me for..." It stopped, realized what was happening, tried to retreat. Too late. Constantine's eyes snapped open, and when he spoke, his voice carried power that made the air shimmer. "No, mate. You're mine. Rule 1 of possession. Never fully enter the mind of someone who knows the game better than you do." He could feel the demon thrashing inside his head, trying to break free. But Constantine had been building mental prisons since before he could shave. He'd trapped angels in his subconscious, bargained with the first of the fallen using his own soul as collateral, and once spent 3 days in his own dying mind fighting off demonic possession while clinically dead. This demon was powerful, but Constantine was stubborn. "Rival!" he shouted. "The guardsmen, they're still in there. The demon's withdrawn from them into me. Get them restrained before it tries to jump back." The Commissar didn't hesitate. He barked orders, and squads moved to secure the 5 collapsed guardsmen, who were gasping and crying like men waking from nightmares. Constantine, meanwhile, was having a very aggressive conversation with his new mental passenger. "Listen up, you pestilent piece of warp shit," he thought at it. "You're in my head now, and I've been living with my own demons for 30 years. You think you can scare me with guilt, with dead friends? I do that to myself every morning before breakfast." The demon snarled, tried to show him Newcastle again. Constantine laughed. Already seen it, lived it, regret it daily. "Got anything new?" "No? Then sit down and shut up while I decide what to do with you." "You cannot contain me forever," the demon hissed inside his skull. "Your mind will break. You will sleep. And when you do, I will devour you from within." "Yeah, probably. But here's the thing. I don't need forever. I just need long enough." Constantine turned to find Magos Brennus hovering nearby, mechadendrites twitching with what might have been curiosity or concern. Hard to tell with tech priests. "Magos," Constantine said, his voice strained. "I need you to build me something. A prison, but not a physical one." Brennus's optical implants whirred. "Explain." "Your cogitators, your data storage, they're physical things, yeah? But they interact with the warp on some level, just like everything else here. I need you to build me an isolated data core. No connections to anything else, self-contained. And I need it to have the capacity to hold, let's call it, a very angry AI, made of spite and bad decisions. You want to transfer the demon from your mind into a machine." Brennus sounded equal parts horrified and fascinated. "That's either brilliant or the most profound heresy I've witnessed in 40 years of service. Both. Definitely both." Constantine wiped blood from his nose. "Can you do it?" "The Omnissiah's teachings suggest that machine spirits can be purged and replaced through proper ritual. If we treat the demon as a corrupted code matrix..." Brennus's mechadendrites began moving rapidly, calculations running behind his augmented eyes. "Yes, theoretically. But it would require precise psychic interface at the moment of transfer. One miscalculation and either the demon escapes or you die. Fantastic odds. I'll take them." Constantine looked at Raval. "Commissar, I'm going to need you to not shoot me for the next hour or so. Think you can manage that?" Raval's expression was unreadable. "You have a demon in your head." "Yep. And you're planning to put it in a machine." "Yep. This is so far beyond heresy I don't even know what to call it. I'm partial to creative problem solving, but you can write whatever you want in the report." Constantine swayed slightly. The demon was fighting harder now, realizing his plan. "Clock's ticking, though. This bastard's stronger than it looks, and I can feel it trying to claw into my brainstem." Vaughn stepped forward. "What do you need from us?" "Time, space, and someone to shoot me if this goes sideways." Constantine pulled out his last cigarette. Actual tobacco this time. He'd nicked it from an officer's quarters. Worth the court-martial. "Oh, and maybe someone to hold my hand. I'm absolutely terrified and could use the moral support." Miller stepped up immediately. "I'll do it, sir. You're a braver man than me, trooper. Or stupider. Haven't decided which." Constantine took a long drag, savoring what might be his last cigarette ever. "Right then, Magos. Let's build a prison for a demon. How hard could it be?" 2 hours later, Constantine was regretting those words. The device Brennus had constructed looked like something between a cogitator core and an Iron Maiden. All circuitry and sacred seals and ominous spikes. Constantine sat in front of it, neural cables attached to his temples, while Brennus made final adjustments and muttered prayers to the Omnissiah. "This is insane," Vaughn muttered, watching from a safe distance. "Noted and agreed," Constantine said. Inside his head, the demon was in a frenzy, throwing itself against his mental walls. He could feel them cracking. "But we're committed now. Brennus, please tell me this thing is ready." "As ready as heretical techno-sorcery can be," Brennus replied. "On your signal, I'll activate the transfer protocol. The demon will be drawn from your consciousness into the core, in theory." "In theory? I've never actually done this before. No one has, because it's completely mad." Story of my life. Constantine closed his eyes. focused on the demon raging inside him. "All right, you bastard. Time to evict you. Brennus, do it." The Magos activated the device. Pain. Not physical pain, something worse. The sensation of having your soul pulled through your skull, of your consciousness being stretched and torn. Constantine screamed, couldn't help it. He felt the demon fighting, clinging to his mind with hooks made of his own guilt and fear. "It's not working," Brennus shouted over the machine's rising whine. "The demon's too deeply integrated." "Then integrate deeper," Constantine roared back. He stopped trying to push the demon out and instead dragged it, hauling it bodily through the neural interface with pure willpower. "You wanted to be in my head? Fine. Let's see how you like being filed away like bad memories." The daemon shrieked, a sound that existed only in psychic space, but still made everyone in the room flinch. Constantine felt it slipping, losing its grip, being pulled inexorably toward the machine, and in its panic, it showed him something. A vision, brief but clear. Other daemons, dozens of them, all across the sector, all using similar methods to corrupt Imperial equipment and personnel. And behind them, orchestrating it all, a presence that made the daemon in his head look like a child's toy. Something vast, something ancient, something that had noticed Constantine the moment he'd arrived in this universe and decided he'd make an excellent pawn. "Oh, bollocks," Constantine whispered. And then the daemon was gone, sucked into the machine with a final howl of rage. The neural cables sparked and went dead. Constantine slumped forward, caught by Milas before he could faceplant into the rockcrete. "Did it work?" someone asked. Constantine wasn't sure who. His head felt empty, scoured clean, like a house after an exorcism. Brennus was studying the device, his mechadendrites probing its interior. The demon is contained, isolated, imprisoned in a self-sustaining logic loop that will prevent it from achieving consciousness. It worked. Emperor preserve us, it actually worked. "Great," Constantine mumbled. "Someone write that down for my tombstone. He did something impossible and stupid. That'll look lovely." Rival appeared in his vision, still holding that ever-present bolt pistol. "You're alive, and apparently not possessed anymore." Disappointed? Undecided. Rival holstered the weapon. "But you were right about one thing. Something is coordinating these attacks. The question is, what do we do about it?" Constantine pulled himself upright, waving off Milas's assistance. His head felt like it had been used as a football, but he was alive and demon-free. Small victories. "We do what I always do," he said, finally getting his cigarette lit with shaking hands. "We find whoever's responsible for this mess and we ruin their day. Comprehensively." The Inquisition arrived 3 days later, which was faster than Constantine had hoped and slower than he'd feared. 2 black-armored stormtroopers entered the command bunker first, hellguns sweeping the room with professional efficiency. Behind them came Inquisitor Cassandra Voke, a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice and disappointment. "Where," she said without preamble, "is the unsanctioned psyker who has been consorting with Xenos and binding demons into Imperial machinery?" Constantine raised his hand from where he sat in the corner, smoking. "That'd be me, John Constantine. Pleasure to meet you. Sorry about the heresy." Voke's eyes narrowed. She was young for an inquisitor, maybe 40, but her gaze held the kind of certainty that came from years of burning problems rather than solving them. Her power armor was understated but clearly master-crafted, and the rosette at her throat marked her as having the Emperor's own authority. "You admit to heresy?" "Oh yeah, multiple counts, I'd imagine. The Xenos thing, the demon thing. Probably a dozen regulations I've broken without even knowing they existed." Constantine took a drag. "But in my defense, I did save your entire regiment from demonic corruption, stopped a warp incursion, and imprisoned a fairly nasty entity that was using Imperial communications to orchestrate all of it." "He speaks the truth, Inquisitor," Magos Brennus said, stepping forward. His mechadendrites twitched nervously. "While his methods are unorthodox, his results are undeniable. The demon is contained. The corruption has been halted." Vogue turned her attention to the device holding the demon. Her psychosenses, Constantine could feel them now, sharp and disciplined, probed the machine. Her expression shifted from suspicion to something that might have been respect. Or horror, hard to tell. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, "and completely heretical. You've created a prison that shouldn't be possible, using principles that violate every sacred teaching." She looked at Constantine. "How?" "Long story, different universe. Very confusing." Constantine stood, wincing as his back protested. 3 days of minimal sleep while helping Brennus refine the demon prison hadn't done him any favors. "Look, I get that I'm a walking violation of your laws, but right now, we've got bigger problems." "Explain." Constantine gestured to a map Vorn had spread across the command table. It showed the sector, with dozens of red markers indicating demon activity. "The entity I trapped showed me something before I stuffed it in your machine. This isn't random corruption, it's coordinated. Somebody, or something, is using similar methods across multiple worlds to build a network. Like a warp-based communications grid, but evil. More evil. Additionally evil." "A demon network," Vogue said flatly. "That's impossible." "Yeah, I get that a lot. Doesn't make it less true." Constantine tapped several markers. These sites all reported similar corruption patterns. Voxcasters acting up, personnel experiencing hallucinations, equipment failure at critical moments. Classic signs of demonic interference, but subtle, coordinated. Rival stepped forward. The warlock also negotiated a temporary ceasefire with the Ork forces during the crisis. "You what?" Vogue's hand moved to the bolt pistol at her hip. "Temporarily," Constantine emphasized, "and only because the Orks were being used as unwitting participants in a summoning ritual. I explained the situation. They agreed fighting demon puppet masters was more fun than fighting us, and we broke the ritual pattern together. Very efficient. Saved loads of lives. You allied with Xenos. I prevented a demonic incursion by convincing the Xenos they were being manipulated. There's a difference." Constantine pulled out another cigarette. He was down to his last pack, traded from a guardsman in exchange for protecting his squad from nightmares. Worth it. "Look, I know this all sounds bad. It sounds like textbook corruption," Vogue interrupted. "A rogue psyker arrives from nowhere, claims expertise with demons, manipulates Imperial forces into accepting heretical practices, and creates tech heresy that would make a Dark Mechanicum priest proud. Tell me why I shouldn't execute you right now." "Because I'm the only one who knows what's actually happening," Constantine said quietly. All the humor drained from his voice. And because deep down, you know I'm right. You felt it when you scanned that demon prison. That thing in there, it's terrified. Not of me, not of you, but of whatever's coordinating all this. And if it scares a demon that much, we should all be bloody terrified. Silence in the bunker. Voke studied him with those sharp, calculating eyes. Constantine could feel her psychic probes testing his defenses, looking for corruption. He let her. He had nothing to hide. Well, nothing relevant to the current crisis anyway.
Your aura is strange, she said finally. Touched by the warp, but not corrupted. Not properly. It's like you're contaminated, but immune. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, I get that a lot too. Apparently, different universes have different rules for how demons work. Where I'm from, I've been playing this game for decades. Here, I'm improvising. But the fundamentals are the same. Demons lie, they manipulate, and they always have a bigger plan. And you claim to know this plan. Not all of it, but I know it involves building a network of corruption across multiple worlds, using Imperial infrastructure as the framework. And I know that whatever's behind it is powerful enough to coordinate dozens of demonic entities across light years of space. Constantine moved to the map, pointing at specific locations. These sites form a pattern. See? It's subtle, but it's there. Geometric. Ritual. Voke leaned closer, studying the map. Her expression shifted, and Constantine knew she saw it too. The points form a summoning circle, she breathed. A circle thousands of kilometers across, spanning multiple planets. Exactly. Your entire sector is the ritual space. Constantine tapped the map's center point, and whatever's coming through, it's going to manifest here, at the Nexus, which, according to your charts, is Hive Mortis. Vorn finished, his face pale. The sector capital. Population, 15 billion. The weight of that number hung in the air like a corpse. 15 billion souls, Voke said quietly, all trapped in one massive summoning circle. If even a fraction of them were corrupted. She looked at Constantine. How long do we have? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Constantine lit his cigarette with shaking hands. The demon I trapped was just an anchor point, a node in the network. But the network's still building, still spreading. Every corrupted Voxcaster, every possessed soldier, every piece of compromised equipment, they're all feeding power into the ritual. Then we shut them all down, Rival said. Complete communications blackout across the sector. Quarantine every suspected site. Purge with flame if necessary. Won't work, Constantine said. The corruption's already too widespread. You'd have to shut down every piece of warp-touching technology in the sector. That includes ships, astropaths, even your sanctioned psychers. You'd be deaf, blind, and defenseless right when you need coordination most. Voke's jaw tightened. Then what do you suggest? Constantine smiled, and it was not a nice smile. We don't break the ritual. We hijack it. Use their own network against them. Turn this from a summoning into a banishing. He looked at each of them in turn. But to do that, I'm going to need 3 things. Your full cooperation. Access to every corrupted site in the sector. And someone to hold my beer. Because this is going to be the single most dangerous thing I've ever attempted. That's saying something, Milas muttered from the corner. Yeah, Constantine agreed. It really is. Voke was silent for a long moment. Then she made a decision that Constantine suspected she'd regret for the rest of her life.
"You have 24 hours to explain your plan in detail," she said.
"If I determine it's viable, and that's a very big if, I'll requisition whatever resources you need." But Constantine, her hand rested on her bolt pistol. "If you're playing us, if this is some elaborate corruption scheme, I will not hesitate to end you. Understood?" Crystal clear. Constantine met her gaze without flinching. "But for what it's worth, Inquisitor, I'm not the bad guy here. I'm just the idiot trying to stop them." Constantine's plan, when he finally explained it in full, was met with the kind of stunned silence usually reserved for funeral services and failed comedy routines. "You want to do what?" Vogue said, her voice dangerously quiet.
"Turn the sector-wide summoning circle into a banishing ritual," Constantine repeated patiently. He'd spread charts across the command table, marking each corrupted site with symbols that made the tech priests twitchy. "Look, it's simple mathematics. Well, occult mathematics. The Daemon network is using Imperial infrastructure to create anchors for a massive warp incursion. But rituals are bidirectional. They can pull things through or push things back. We just need to reverse the polarity." "Reverse the polarity," Raval repeated flatly, "of a sector-wide demonic ritual." "Yeah, when you say it like that, it sounds mental. But the principles sound." Constantine pointed at his diagrams. "Every corrupted site is a node in the network. The demon I trapped, it was one node. If we can replicate what I did at each major site, bind the demons into isolated prisons, we effectively claim control of the nodes. Then, at the moment of manifestation, we reverse the ritual's intent. Instead of pulling something through, we push it back." Magus Brennus was studying the diagrams with his various optical implants. "The theory is not entirely unsound. If we treat the network as a corrupted data system, purging each node and re-establishing control would theoretically allow us to input new parameters. But the precision required..." He paused. "The slightest miscalculation would result in catastrophic failure." "Define catastrophic," Vorn asked. "Total demonic possession of the sector, followed by everyone involved having their souls torn apart and scattered across the warp for eternity," Constantine said cheerfully. "But that's already going to happen if we do nothing. So really, we're just choosing which flavor of catastrophic failure we prefer." Vogue was pacing now, her power armor's servos whirring softly. "Even if your theory is correct, and that's a massive assumption, we don't have the resources. You're talking about deploying teams to dozens of sites across multiple worlds, all within days. The logistics alone are impossible by conventional methods, yeah." Constantine lit another cigarette. "But here's the thing. I don't need teams at every site. I just need the major nodes, the big anchor points that are feeding the most power into the ritual. If we take those down, the smaller nodes become unstable and collapse on their own." "How many major nodes?" Revel asked. Constantine counted on his fingers. 7. 7 sites that are acting as primary power conduits. Take those 7, and the whole network falls apart. 7 sites across 7 worlds, Vogue said. We'd need transport, specialized equipment, sanctioned psychers who won't immediately be corrupted. She stopped, turned to Constantine. "You're volunteering to lead these teams, aren't you?" "Not lead. More like consult, provide expertise. Try not to die horribly." Constantine shrugged. "Look, I know I'm not exactly trustworthy,
But I'm the only one who's actually trapped one of these bastards and lived to tell about it. That counts for something, yeah. The Inquisitor studied him for a long moment. You understand that this would require me to officially sanction your methods, to give my seal of approval to techniques that border on heresy at best and full demonic collaboration at worst. I understand, and you understand that if this fails, if you're corrupted, or if this is all an elaborate trap, the responsibility falls on me. My career, my reputation, possibly my life. Yeah, I get that too. Constantine met her gaze. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I didn't choose to land in your universe, but I'm here and I'm trying to help, and this is the best plan I've got. Silence. Then Voke laughed, a short, bitter sound. Do you know what the worst part is? I believe you. Against all training, all instinct, all common sense. I believe that you genuinely think this will work. Is that a yes? It's a I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life, but yes. She turned to her stormtroopers. Vox the fleet. I need 7 rapid deployment teams assembled within 12 hours. Each team needs a sanctioned psyker, tech priest support, and enough firepower to level a small city if things go wrong. And me, Constantine added. Each team needs me, or at least my expertise, which means, he grimaced, which means I need to teach people how to bind demons into machines in 12 hours, while also preparing the primary ritual that'll tie everything together. Impossible, Brennus said. Yeah, I'm sensing a theme here. Constantine stubbed out his cigarette. Right then, let's start with the basics. Who here has experience with techno-sorcery, forbidden rituals, or general heresy? Show of hands. Nobody raised their hands. Fantastic. This is going to be a long 12 hours. 10 hours later, Constantine was ready to murder someone. Possibly himself. No, 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 he shouted at the assembled psychers Voke had requisitioned. There were 6 of them, sanctioned psychics with proper training and imperial approval. All of them were looking at Constantine like he'd grown a second head. You can't just force the demon into the prison. You need to trick it, make it want to go in. But that's heresy. One of them, a thin woman with the scarring of psychic conditioning, protested. We're taught to resist demonic temptation, not engage with it. And normally that's excellent advice. But right now, we need to think like con men, not soldiers. Constantine ran his hands through his hair. Look, demons are predictable. They're arrogant. They think they're smarter than humans because they're eternal and we're not. So you use that against them. You make them think they're winning, right up until the moment you slam the prison door shut. Another psyker, an older man with augmetic eyes, spoke up. The warlock speaks of manipulation techniques that require extensive knowledge of demonic psychology. Knowledge that borders on forbidden lore. Yeah, it's all very forbidden and heretical. File a complaint later. Constantine pointed at the demon prison Brennus had built, or rather, one of 7 identical copies they'd managed to construct. Right now, I need you lot to understand how this works, because I can't be at all 7 sites simultaneously, much as I'd like to. Then how? The woman started. Sympathetic connection. Constantine pulled out a small mirror, one of 7 he'd prepared. Each one was etched with identical symbols in his own blood. Old magic, very old. I'll be at the primary site, Hive Mortis, You lot will be at the 6 secondary sites. These mirrors will link us. I'll channel the primary ritual through them, and you'll each handle the local binding. Think of it as distributed processing. That's not how psychic powers work. Augmetic Eyes protested. It's not how your psychic powers work. Mine are a bit more flexible. Constantine was tired, wired on bad recaf, and running on about 2 hours of sleep. His patience was thinner than the veil between reality and the warp. Look, do you want to save the sector or not? We want to serve the Emperor, the woman said stiffly. Great. Then trust that maybe, just maybe, someone who's been dealing with demons since before you were born might know a thing or two about how to fight them. Constantine softened slightly. I know this is all backwards from your training. I know it feels wrong. But sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to use their own tactics against them. That's what I do. That's all I've ever done. The Psychers exchanged glances. Finally, Augmetic Eyes nodded. We'll follow your lead, Warlock. But if this is a trap, you'll have plenty of chances to kill me. I know. Everyone keeps reminding me. Constantine handed each of them a mirror. Right. Let's go over the binding ritual one more time. And somebody get me more cigarettes. I've gone through 2 packs in the last hour and I'm starting to feel it. Millis appeared with a fresh pack, somehow procured from Emperor knows where. Constantine could have kissed him. You're a saint, trooper. Just don't get me executed for aiding heresy, sir. No promises. Constantine lit up, took a long drag, and turned back to his very reluctant students. All right, you lot. From the top. What's the first rule of demon binding? Never trust them, the woman recited. Good. What's the second rule? Always have an escape plan. Excellent. And the third rule? The Psychers hesitated. Constantine grinned. The third rule is, when in doubt, cheat like your life depends on it. Because it absolutely does. Hive Mortis earned its name honestly. The massive city spire rose from the planetary surface like a tombstone commemorating humanity's bad decisions. 15 billion souls crammed into a vertical nightmare of rust, pollution, and barely controlled desperation. Constantine stood on a landing platform halfway up the spire, watching storm clouds gather overhead with deeply suspicious timing. Those clouds are warp-touched, Voke said beside him, her psychic senses clearly screaming warnings. The manifestation is beginning. Yeah, I noticed. Constantine checked his watch. A battered thing he'd lifted from a dead officer. We've got maybe 6 hours. The other team's in position. Confirmed. All 6 secondary sites report ready. Voke's expression was grim, though ready is a relative term when dealing with your brand of insanity. Oi, my brand of insanity has kept me alive through 3 separate apocalypses and a very aggressive exorcism. Constantine pulled out his mirror, seeing his own haggard reflection stare back. 6 smaller reflections appeared in the corners, the other Psychers, linked through sympathetic magic that made the Inquisitor visibly uncomfortable. Right then, everyone hear me? Confirmations echoed through the psychic link. Constantine could feel their fear. Trained Imperial Psychers, confronting heretical methods that went against everything they'd been taught. He didn't blame them. All right, listen up, he said, projecting his voice through the mirror link. What we're about to do is mad, dangerous, and probably going to get at least half of us killed.
but it's also the only shot we've got at stopping something much worse. The demons are going to manifest at all 7 sites simultaneously. When they do, you let them come through, just enough to anchor. Then you spring the trap. Understood?
This goes against every... One of the psychers started.
Yeah, I know. File a complaint with the Emperor after we're not all possessed. Constantine cut him off. Look, I've done this before. Trust the process. And more importantly, trust yourselves. You've been trained your whole lives for this. I'm just providing the unorthodox methodology. Beside him, Magos Brennus was making final adjustments to the demon prison they'd constructed. This one was larger, more elaborate, designed to act as the primary anchor for the entire ritual reversal. The tech priest's mechadendrites moved with nervous precision. The machine spirits are agitated, Brennus muttered. They sense what's coming. Smart machines, Constantine said. He could feel it too. Pressure building in the air, reality wearing thin. The ritual was reaching its crescendo. How's our friend doing? He gestured to the smaller demon prison they'd brought, the one containing Gary Lester's face. Or what had been wearing it anyway. Contained but active, Brennus reported. The entity is aware of what's happening. It's trying to communicate. Let me guess. Lots of threats, promises of horrible death, standard demon patter. Actually, Brennus's optical implants focused on the device. It's laughing. Constantine's blood went cold. Bollocks. What does that mean? Voke demanded. It means Constantine was cut off as the first demon manifested. Reality didn't so much tear as it did peel apart like rotted fruit. The air above the platform split open, and something stepped through. It was huge, 3 meters of twisted flesh and brass armor, burning with witchfire that smelled of sulfur and despair. And it wore another familiar face. Hello again, John, it said with Emma's voice. Sweet, kind Emma, who died in his arms after he'd failed to save her from a demon cult. Did you miss me? Not particularly, Constantine said, though his hands were shaking. You're not Emma. You're just wearing her face to mess with my head. Am I? The daemon smiled with Emma's smile. Or am I exactly what you made me? All that guilt, all that regret, it had to go somewhere, John. The warp is very good at preserving such things. Through the mirror link, Constantine could feel the other daemons manifesting at the secondary sites. Each one wearing a different face, each one targeting a different team. The coordination was perfect, terrifying. Now, Constantine whispered to Voke. Activate the prisons. Brennus threw the switch. The daemon prison powered up with a sound like screaming metal and tortured souls. The daemon wearing Emma's face turned, suddenly wary. What is this? This is me learning from my mistakes, Constantine said. He stepped forward into the ritual circle he'd drawn around the prison. See, the first time I trapped one of you lot, I tried to force it. Brute force binding. Worked, but it was messy. This time, he pulled out a cigarette, lit it with hands that were steadier now. This time, I'm being smart about it. The daemon lunged, and Constantine was ready. He didn't try to stop it. Instead, he opened his mind just enough. Let it think it was winning. Let it believe it was about to possess him. And then, Brennus activated the prison's secondary function. The daemon was sucked in mid-lunge, reality bending around it as the machine's warp field collapsed inward like a black hole made of mathematics and spite. It screamed with Emma's voice, but Constantine hardened his heart. That wasn't Emma. Emma was dead, and this thing was just a puppet made of his guilt. Gotcha, he breathed. Through the mirror link, he felt the other teams springing their traps. 5 successes, 1 failure. Screaming cut short as something went horribly wrong at one of the secondary sites. Team 4 is down, Voke reported, her voice tight. The demon broke free. It's... She paused, listening to her vox. Emperor's mercy. It's possessed the entire garrison. Bugger. Constantine's mind raced. 1 node lost. That would destabilize the ritual, but maybe not fatally if they moved fast. Can we compensate? Unknown, Brennus said, his mechadendrites working frantically over the calculations. The network was designed for 7 nodes. 6 might be sufficient, or it might cause catastrophic feedback when we attempt the reversal. Fantastic. Love those odds. Constantine looked at the imprisoned demon, then at the storm clouds overhead that were now swirling in distinctly unnatural patterns. Right. New plan. We proceed with 6 nodes, and I'll manually stabilize the ritual during the reversal. That's suicide, Voke said. The psychic backlash alone will probably kill me, yeah. But it beats letting a sector-wide demonic invasion succeed. Constantine grinned without humor. Besides, I've died before. Several times, actually. I'm getting quite good at it. A Vox unit nearby crackled to life, and that familiar layered voice echoed across the platform. Clever, Constantine. Very clever. You've captured 6 of our anchors. Delayed our manifestation, but you cannot stop what's already begun. The ritual is too far advanced. The gate is opening, and what comes through? The voice laughed and the sound made reality ripple. What comes through remembers you, remembers what you did. Every betrayal, every failure, every soul you sacrificed for your own survival. It's been waiting such a long time to meet you properly. Yeah? Well, tell it I'm RSVPing no to this little party. Constantine grabbed the demon prison and hauled it toward the center of his larger ritual circle. Brennus, I need you to link this device to the primary array. Use it as a focusing mechanism. That would create feedback that... The Mago stopped, understanding dawning in his augmented eyes. You're going to use the trapped demon as a psychic amplifier. Exactly. Fight fire with fire. Use their own corrupted energy to power the banishing. Constantine was working fast now, redrawing symbols, adjusting the ritual geometry. It'll be like slamming a door in their faces with one of their own mates. The demon will resist, Voke warned. Oh, it'll do more than resist. It'll probably try to tear my mind apart from the inside. Constantine finished his preparations and stood in the circle's center, cigarette dangling from his lips. But here's the thing about John Constantine. I've been having my mind torn apart by demons since I was 15. I'm practically a professional at this point. The storm overhead was intensifying, lightning that burned wrong colors, thunder that sounded like screaming. Reality was wearing thin, and through the gaps, Constantine could see something vast stirring in the warp. Something that had been waiting a very, very long time. Right then, he said, flicking away his cigarette. Let's crash this apocalypse before it gets started. Everyone ready? 5 voices confirmed through the mirror link. 5 teams, 5 prisons, 5 trapped demons. It would have to be enough. Constantine took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began the ritual that would either save the sector or damn them all.
"In the name of every poor bastard I've ever let down," he muttered. "This better bloody work." The ritual started with words. Ancient words from a dozen different traditions, woven together in a linguistic abomination that made Voke flinch and Brennus's mechadendrites twitch with religious offense. But Constantine had learned long ago that magic cared less about orthodoxy than intention. And his intention right now was very clear. Slam the door on whatever cosmic horror was trying to claw its way through. Power flowed through him. Not the disciplined, sanctioned, psychic energy the Imperium taught, but something rawer. The trapped demons in their prisons began to scream as Constantine forced them to serve as conduits, channeling their own corrupted essence back through the network they'd helped create. "You cannot use us against ourselves," they shrieked in unison. "We are eternal. We are—" "Your batteries," Constantine grunted, his nose already bleeding from the psychic strain. "Rechargeable ones at that. Now shut up and power the ritual like good little power sources." Through the mirror link, he felt the other psychers doing the same at their sites. The woman with scarring, her name was Lyra, he'd learned, was facing down a demon wearing her dead brother's face. But she was holding steady, channeling the energy just like he'd taught her. The older man, Corvin, was actually laughing as he worked, finding some dark humor in the heretical absurdity of it all. The network was lighting up, node by node. 6 points of concentrated warp energy, all connected through Constantine's will and the sympathetic link of the mirrors. In his mind's eye, he could see the pattern, the massive ritual circle that the enemy had spent weeks constructing, now turning back on itself like a snake eating its own tail. But something was wrong. The storm overhead was intensifying too fast. Reality wasn't just thin, it was tearing. And through the tears, Constantine caught glimpses of what was waiting on the other side. It was massive, incomprehensibly vast, and it was staring directly at him with something that might have been recognition, or might have been hunger, possibly both. "That's not good," he muttered. "What's not good?" Voke shouted over the howling wind that had materialized from nowhere. "That thing, that's not just a demon, that's something." Constantine's voice cut off as understanding hit him like a brick. "Oh, you clever bastard. You absolute genius bastard." "Constantine, what is it?" "It's me," Constantine laughed, slightly hysterical. "Or it was. A version of me anyway, from another failed timeline, another universe where I didn't win, where the darkness took me and turned me into—" He gestured at the thing in the warp. "Into that. A Constantine who made all the wrong choices and became exactly what everyone always feared I'd become." The thing in the warp smiled with his face aged and twisted and wrong, but recognizably him. When it spoke, its voice was Constantine's voice, layered with the screams of everyone he'd ever failed. "Hello, John," it said. "I've been looking forward to this. Did you really think you were the only you who'd figured out how to slip between universes? I've been doing this for centuries, hunting down every Constantine across the multiverse, corrupting them, consuming them, adding their knowledge, their guilt, their power to mine. That's—" Constantine's mind reeled. "That's not possible. The multiverse doesn't work like that. Doesn't it? You're here, aren't you? Thrown across reality by forces you don't understand. But I understand them, John. I've mastered them. And now I'm going to add you to my collection. Your universe, your knowledge, your particular flavor of self-loathing. It'll taste delicious. The warp Constantine began to push through properly now, using the ritual network as an anchor point. Constantine felt his own ritual wavering, the energy he'd been redirecting suddenly fighting back with intelligence and purpose.
"The entity is too strong," Corvin's voice crackled through the mirror link. "It's adapting to our bindings." "Hold the line," Constantine shouted back, pouring more of himself into the ritual. His vision was going red around the edges. Blood was flowing freely from his nose, his ears, probably his eyes. "Just hold for another." One of the mirrors shattered. Lyra's scream cut off abruptly. Another node down. "Bugger." Constantine recalculated desperately. 5 nodes. He needed at least 4 to make this work, and they were dropping like flies. "Everyone pull back. Minimum safe distance. Don't try to be heroes." But Corvin's voice came back, surprisingly calm. "Sorry, Warlock, but we didn't survive this long in the Imperium by running from our duties. If we fall serving the Emperor. No regrets." "You magnificent suicidal idiots," Constantine breathed. The warp Constantine was almost through now, its form solidifying into something that existed in 3 dimensions, despite clearly operating in several more. It reached out with hands that split reality just by existing. Constantine made a decision, possibly the stupidest one of his life, which was saying something. "Brennus," he shouted. "When I give the word, overload the primary prison. Dump all its contained energy directly into the ritual." "That will destroy the device," Brennus protested. "Yeah, that's the idea." Constantine turned to Voke. "Inquisitor, you've been very patient with my heresy. I'm about to commit my biggest one yet, just so you know." "What are you?" Constantine didn't answer. Instead, he reached out through the ritual network and did something no sane psyker would attempt. He opened a direct channel to the warp Constantine. "Oi!" he shouted across dimensions. "You want to consume me? Absorb my knowledge and power? Come on then. Doors wide open." "Constantine, no!" Voke's psychic voice slammed into him, but too late. The warp Constantine lunged, eager and hungry. It poured into Constantine's mind like acid, like fire, like everything terrible he'd ever feared he might become. And Constantine, the idiot, let it in. But as it entered, Constantine sprang his final trap. See, the thing about absorbing someone's consciousness is that it goes both ways. The warp Constantine got access to John Constantine's mind, memories and power, but Constantine got access to the warp Constantine's. And more importantly, he got access to its connection to the ritual network. "Gotcha," Constantine whispered through bloody lips. He seized control of the entire network, not from outside, but from within, using the warp Constantine's own power against it, turning its vast accumulated knowledge into a weapon against itself. It was like judo on a cosmic scale, and Constantine had always been good at winning fights he had no business surviving. "What? How?" The warp Constantine tried to pull back, suddenly realizing the trap. "Rule number 3, mate," Constantine said, his voice echoing across 7 worlds through 6 remaining mirror links. "When in doubt, cheat like your life depends on it. Brennus, now." The Magos hit the override. The primary demon prison exploded, not physically but psychically. All its contained energy, all the power of the trapped demon, all the accumulated warp corruption, everything. It all detonated at once, directly into the ritual network. And Constantine, acting as the living conduit, channeled every bit of that energy straight at the warp Constantine. The explosion of psychic force was visible from orbit.
a pillar of light that burned wrong colors, stretching from the planet's surface to somewhere beyond reality itself. The warp Constantine screamed as it was torn apart. Its carefully collected power scattered back across the universes it had violated. Constantine screamed too, because getting hit with that much energy while remaining conscious enough to direct it was like trying to drink from a fire hose made of broken glass and regret. But it worked. The ritual reversed. The summoning circle became a banishing circle, and the warp Constantine, along with every demon it had coordinated, was hurled back through the tears in reality with enough force to seal them behind it. Reality snapped back into place like a rubber band. Constantine collapsed. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness claimed him was Milas's voice, distant and worried. "Sir, sir, is he dead? Is he? Someone check if he's dead." And Constantine thought, with what might have been his last conscious thought. "Not yet, kid. Not yet." Constantine woke up 3 days later in a medical bay that smelled of disinfectant, incense, and the lingering psychic residue of near-death experiences. His head felt like it had been used as a football in a particularly aggressive match, and every part of his body ached in ways he didn't have names for. "You're awake," Vok's voice came from his left. Against all probability and medical expectation, Constantine cracked open one eye to find the Inquisitor sitting beside his bed, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. "Yeah, I'm stubborn like that. Habit of not dying when I should. Very annoying for people trying to kill me. 4 of the 6 psychers survived," Vok said without preamble. Lyra and another, Domitian, were consumed by their demons when the ritual collapsed. The other 4 are in induced comas, recovering from psychic trauma. They'll live, but they'll never be the same. Constantine closed his eye. 2 more deaths. 2 more names to add to the list that kept him awake at night. "I'm sorry. Don't be. They died as heroes, servants of the Emperor who gave their lives to save 15 billion souls." Vok's voice was flat, professional, but Constantine could hear the grief underneath. "The official report will state that a rogue chaos incursion was detected and repelled through orthodox methods. Your involvement will be minimized, meaning erased, meaning classified at the highest levels. Only myself, Magos Brennus, Lieutenant Vorn, and Commissar Rival know the full truth. And we've all been bound by oaths of secrecy that carry a death sentence if broken." Constantine opened both eyes now, turning to look at her properly. "You're protecting me. I'm protecting the Imperium from the knowledge that heretical methods saved it," Vok corrected. "There's a difference. If word got out that we used demon binding and Xenos cooperation to stop a warp incursion, it would cause more problems than it solved. Faith is the Imperium's greatest weapon. Undermining that faith, even with truth, serves chaos. So I'm your dirty little secret. You're a problem I don't know how to solve," Vok said, finally showing some emotion. Frustration mostly. "You saved the sector, unquestionably. But your methods are heretical. Your very existence is a violation of Imperial law. I should execute you. Every regulation, every teaching, every oath I've sworn demands it." She paused. "But you were right. About the demons, the network, the ritual, all of it. And that terrifies me more than any chaos corruption ever could." Constantine sat up slowly, wincing. Someone had bandaged most of him, though he could still feel the psychic scarring beneath his skin. "So what happens now? Now you disappear." Vok pulled out a data slate. "I've arranged transport off-world. falsified records that will hold up to moderate scrutiny, enough ration credits to last 6 months, and travel papers that will get you to the sector edge. After that, you're on your own. You're letting me go. I'm choosing the lesser evil. If I kill you, I lose the one person who's proven capable of fighting chaos on its own terms. If I keep you, I risk corruption spreading through my organization. So I'm doing what any sensible inquisitor would do. I'm making you someone else's problem. She stood, preparing to leave. But Constantine, if I ever hear that you've fallen to corruption, that you've used your knowledge for chaos's ends instead of fighting it, I will hunt you across the galaxy and ensure your death is neither quick nor merciful. Understood? Constantine nodded, crystal clear. And Inquisitor, for what it's worth, thank you for trusting me, for letting me help. I know it wasn't easy. Vogue paused at the door. The Emperor protects Constantine, even scoundrels and heretics apparently, though I wish he'd chosen an easier vessel. Still breathing? Miracles happen. Go on, tap subscribe, hit that cursed bell, and follow me into whatever hellhole comes next. She left. Constantine was alone with his thoughts and his aches for about 30 seconds before the door opened again, and Milas walked in, carrying a tray with what passed for food in the Imperial Guard. "Thought you might be hungry, sir," the young trooper said, setting the tray down. "It's not much, but it's edible. Mostly." Milas. Constantine felt something suspiciously like emotion in his chest. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did, sir. You saved my life. Multiple times. And you saved everyone else's lives too, even if most of them will never know it." Milas straightened, suddenly formal. "I wanted to say, it was an honor serving with you. Even if everything we did was technically heresy. Especially because it was heresy," Constantine corrected with a grin. "The best operations always are." He pulled out his cigarette case. Someone had returned his personal effects and found it empty. "Bugger. You wouldn't happen to..." Milas produced a full pack from his pocket. "Already requisitioned, sir. Consider it a parting gift. You're a gentleman and a scholar, trooper." Constantine lit one with his salvaged lighter, savoring the taste. "What about you? What happens to the 217th? "We're being reassigned. New front, new war. Commissar Raval's coming with us. Lieutenant Vorn, too. We'll probably die horribly in some trench somewhere, but..." Milas shrugged. "That's the job. At least we'll die knowing we helped stop something worse." "That's the spirit. Very inspirational." Constantine took a drag. "Listen, kid. When you're out there fighting the endless war, remember something for me. The Imperium tells you that faith and duty are enough, that following orders and dying for the Emperor is the highest calling. And maybe they're right. But sometimes, just sometimes, the best way to serve is to break the rules, to think for yourself, to choose the right thing over the easy thing." "That sounds like heresy, sir." "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" Constantine grinned. "Good thing you're not listening to a heretic then. Just a concerned citizen offering unsolicited advice." Milas smiled, genuinely smiled, for maybe the first time since Constantine had met him. "I'll keep it in mind, sir. Try not to die out there. No promises, but I'll do my best." After Milas left, Constantine finished his cigarette in peace, watching through the window as Hive Mortis continued its eternal grind of survival. 15 billion people, all living their lives, completely unaware of how close they'd come to demonic extinction. That was fine. Constantine had never wanted recognition anyway. Hell, he actively avoided it most of the time. But as he sat there, smoking and aching and alive against all odds, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd done it, saved the sector, stopped a cosmic-level threat, and he'd only had to commit moderate heresy to do it. By John Constantine's standards, that was practically a win. The door opened one more time. Magos Brennus entered, his mechadendrites carrying a small, wrapped package. Warlock Constantine, the tech priest said formally, "I wish to present you with this before your departure." Constantine unwrapped it to find a data slate, small, portable, and clearly custom-built. "What is it?" "A compilation of everything we learned about warp corruption in technology. Safeguards, countermeasures, detection protocols." Brennus's mechanical voice held something that might have been respect. "You forced me to think beyond orthodox Mechanicus teachings, to see machine spirits as things that could be corrupted but also defended through unconventional means. It was illuminating." "High praise from a tech priest," Constantine said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Magos. The Omnissiah works in mysterious ways, perhaps even through heretics." Brennus turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The demon you trapped, the one wearing Gary Lester's face. I purged it from the prison before disposal. But I found something interesting in the data corruption it left behind." "What?" "A message, hidden in the code. It said, 'Sorry, John, not your fault. Never was.'" Brennus's optical implants focused on Constantine. "I thought you should know." The tech priest left. Constantine sat very still for a long moment, cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. Then, very quietly, he started to laugh. It turned into something that might have been crying, or might have been both, or might have been the sound of a man finally letting go of a ghost that had haunted him for too many years. "Bloody hell, Gary," he whispered to the empty room. "You always did know how to time a parting line." He finished his cigarette, gathered his meager possessions, and prepared to disappear into the Imperium's vast, uncaring bureaucracy. There would be other fights, other demons, other impossible situations that required a bastard with flexible morals and extensive occult knowledge. But for now, John Constantine was content to be alive, mobile, and heading toward the next disaster with his eyes wide open. After all, someone had to keep the universe honest. Might as well be the con man who'd made a career of it. 6 months later, Constantine found himself in a dive bar on a frontier world so far from anywhere important that even the administratum had forgotten to tax it. The whiskey was terrible, the atmosphere was worse, and the company consisted mostly of miners, smugglers, and people who asked too few questions, which made it absolutely perfect. He'd grown a beard, changed his coat for something less distinctive, started going by John Clare in official records, though anyone with sense could tell it was an alias. But sense was in short supply out here on the edge, and Constantine had learned to appreciate that. The data slate Brennus had given him sat on the table beside his drink, its screen displaying reports of warp corruption incidents across a dozen sectors. Old habits died hard. Even here, even trying to disappear, Constantine couldn't stop watching for the signs, the patterns, the little corruptions that grew into apocalypses if left unchecked. "This seat taken?" a voice asked. Constantine looked up to find a woman in worn armor, with the scarring of someone who'd seen combat, and the sharp eyes of someone who'd survived it. She carried herself with military precision, but without the blind faith he'd seen in most Imperial soldiers. "It is now," he said, gesturing to the chair. She sat, ordered something that passed for beer in this establishment, and studied him with uncomfortable intensity. "You're John Constantine." Constantine's hand moved subtly toward the concealed blade in his coat. "Never heard of him. Relax. I'm not here to arrest you or kill you or whatever the Inquisition has planned." She pulled out a data chip. "I'm here because 6 months ago something happened on Hive Mortis. Something that saved 15 billion lives but officially never occurred. And I'm here because similar things keep happening wherever a certain blonde-haired con man shows up. Sounds like an interesting fellow. Sure, it's me. I've been tracking patterns for 3 years. Demonic corruption incidents that resolve themselves impossibly. Chaos cults that collapse from internal sabotage that defies explanation. Warp rifts that seal themselves after mysterious figures are spotted in the area." She pushed the data chip across the table. "You're either the luckiest man in the Imperium, or you're doing something no one else knows how to do." Constantine studied her. Not Inquisition. Wrong bearing, wrong energy. Rogue trader, maybe? Or someone else operating outside the standard Imperial framework. "And if I was this Constantine fellow, which I'm not, what would you want with him?" "I'd want to hire him." She leaned forward. "I represent a group. No official sanction, no Imperial recognition. Just people who've seen enough to know that sometimes the rules need breaking. Sometimes heresy is the only sane response to madness. We call ourselves the Ember Circle. And we could use someone with your particular talents." "The Ember Circle." Constantine laughed. "That's properly ominous. You lot have a secret handshake and everything. Mock all you want, but you know I'm right. You can't just drift around forever, Constantine. You're too good at what you do. Too effective. Eventually, you'll either have to commit to something or watch as everything you fought for falls apart without you." Constantine lit a cigarette, his last from Milas's gift. He'd been rationing them, making them last, but this seemed like an appropriate moment. "And what exactly does the Ember Circle do?" "What you do. We fight chaos on its own terms. We use unconventional methods. We operate in the shadows where the Imperium's rigid orthodoxy can't reach." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd seen too much and decided to laugh about it. "We're heretics fighting to save an empire that would execute us for heresy. It's absurd, but someone has to do it. Sounds exhausting. It is, but you're already doing it alone. Why not do it with support, resources, people who actually understand what you're up against?" Constantine took a long drag, thinking. He'd spent his entire adult life operating solo, trusting no one, relying on nothing but his wits and his willingness to do what others wouldn't. And it had kept him alive, mostly. But at a cost he felt in every scar and every nightmare. Maybe it was time to try something different. Or maybe it was the same mistake he'd made 100 times before, trusting people who'd inevitably betray him or die screaming because he'd led them somewhere they shouldn't have gone. But then again, John Constantine had never been good at learning from his mistakes. "All right," he said finally. "I'm listening. Tell me about the Ember Circle." She smiled. "First round's on me. This is going to take a while." Outside, the stars burned cold and distant in the void between worlds. Somewhere out there, chaos stirred and plotted and corrupted. Somewhere out there, good people fought and died in wars they didn't understand, against enemies beyond comprehension. Somewhere out there, the Imperium ground forward on the backs of billions, crushing and saving in equal measure. And somewhere, in a forgotten bar on a forgotten world, John Constantine, conman, magician, heretic and bastard, made the decision to stop running and start fighting back properly. The Emperor protects, they said. But sometimes, Constantine thought, the Emperor needed all the help he could get. Even from scruffy occultists with questionable morals and a talent for surviving the unsurvivable. The Ember Circle, he muttered, accepting another terrible whiskey. What kind of idiot names their secret organization after something that sounds like a dark magic cult? The same kind of idiot who fights demons with cigarettes and sarcasm, she replied. Constantine laughed, genuine, tired but real. Fair point. All right then. Let's see what fresh hell you lot have gotten yourselves into. But I'm warning you now. I'm expensive, I'm difficult, and I make terrible decisions at the worst possible times. So we've heard. That's exactly why we want you. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But there's also John Constantine, doing what he does best, cheating death, breaking rules, and saving people who'll never know his name. The galaxy was vast, the threats were endless, and the odds were always terrible. But then again, terrible odds had never stopped him before.